Something else. So there's something else that has been recently coming up are these, which are called Waré hives. And the Waré hives, as you can see, are smaller, so they're lighter. You can lift them a little bit easier. Something that's interesting about a Waré hive that I think it's worth talking about is the concept of a Waré hive, which has been around for probably 500 years, is that they let the bee colony naturally grow within the hive. So they start with one box on the top, and every time you add a box, you're adding a box by lifting the whole colony up and putting the box on the bottom, so that it's sort of like that log. When they start up here, they start at the top and they start building their comb down and down and down and down. They'll start putting their honey up in the top, but their family will keep going down till it gets near the door. So every time I add a box, I add it to the bottom, and then the family is close to the door so that it can defend itself, and the product is way up here. The trouble is it gets pretty unwieldy when it's this big. I've got to lift that whole thing up, and it's kind of heavy when it gets that big to slip a box underneath. Now some people are just treating these boxes like these boxes, and they're just opening them up as they go. And that's not the way the hive was designed to work, and it does cause disruption within the hive. Now in these hives, they don't make the frames like they do in these hives. In these ones, it's a mix. It's a top bar, and the bees get to build their own comb within it. But then there's another set of top bars, another set of top bars, and another set of top bars. So the way you harvest from this, if you're following traditional rules, is to grab something like a piano wire and pull it through the bottom here, wrap it around and pull it through so that you cut all of the wax comb there, and then lift this off. The trouble is that you don't have any opportunity to inspect what's going on inside of the hive. So according to law in the United States of America, the reason that we don't allow this kind of beekeeping and do allow this kind of beekeeping is that an inspector can come in and look inside of this hive to determine the health and viability of the bees. And as long as we're doing that, then things like American foul brood and some of the problems that can happen in the hive that can be very contagious can be kept in check. But in this type of a hive, because we're not supposed to disturb it, it acts a lot like a tree. And I don't know for sure, but I'd say you might run into some questions by some state inspectors who would say this isn't really viable because I can't go in and check the status of the hive here. This is a traditional stack box where the two bottom boxes, you notice how they're a little bit bigger? They're called deeps. So these ones are 9.5 inches tall, and these are 5 or 6 3/4 inches, and they're called shallows. And what happens is we put the two on the bottom so that the bee colony can make a ball or a brood ball here, and then these are our honey supers that we put and stack up. The trouble is that if you're not going regularly into the hive, and I've got a lot of beehives, so sometimes I'm not in here as quickly, the queen can make it up into a different box and start laying eggs. And if she does, the size frames that are inside of here don't fit the same as here, and likewise these 9.5s don't fit in here. So if you start having a brood ball that's up in here and you want to bring it back down, you have troubles because you're running in two different types of equipment. So that's why we stick with all shallows here, because now I can move frames up and down for wherever I need to. It's a little more efficient. It's not the traditional way. Another thing that some people do is they'll put a queen excluder or a wire frame, a wire mesh in the middle here that's tight enough that the little worker bees can go in and out of, but it's too tight for the queen to fit through. Her big abdomen just won't let her fit into that space. So it keeps her down into this area. And the trouble that I have with that is if you've got a queen who is very fertile, you're restricting her ability to amass a strong colony by telling her all you have is this much room, I won't let you have any more. So in nature, she's got as much room as she needs to. In a top bar hive, she's got as much room as she needs to. But in these, when you're restricting her with that queen excluder, you're forcing that colony to do your bidding. And I think there's a better way. Now if we want to look at a different way, and I like putting this one in the mix, this is our pollinator 6-pack. So this is the way that beekeeping is done today, and a lot of people don't understand this. And when I talk about the way beekeeping has gone awry, It has a lot to do with orders of efficiency. So if I'm stacking boxes up onto a truck to take across the country to visit different flowers when they're in bloom, to different monoculture fields when they're in bloom, it stands to reason that at some point in time I'm going to try and make it a little more efficient and put them onto pallets, palletize them. So in this case, pallets were made that were big enough to host 6 colonies in them at a time. So you don't have to lift up 6 individual boxes and stack them. You only have to lift up a 6-pack and stack them up onto your semi 1 or 2 or 3 layers deep. So the colony 6-pack works very efficiently in a monoculture type of a world. But in this situation, and mind you, the people that work with these types of hives will have a semi-load of them. So we're talking of 5,000, 10,000 hives where you've got 1,000 of these different types of things, or 1,500 of these types of situations where you pull up into a large monoculture field and you pull off with a forklift and drop these things 1 or 2 at a time every couple hundred yards all the way down the field and let the bees go to town, and then come and get them and load them back up afterward. But I understand why you have to do it in this kind of a hive, and that's why we keep this hive in our classroom apiary, because we want to show people what happens if you need to go into this hive and take the bees out. When you're trying to put the boxes back in and all the bees are standing up in the walls around it, you're killing a lot of bees just to put the boxes back in. And as you set the boxes down, you don't have room to be able to wiggle the box down. You just have to put it down. So a lot of bees get squished into this situation, which means that everybody else is pissed off. So when we work these hives, we're definitely suited up. These other hives, when I work those, I'm wearing a mask. I can go this way and maybe catch a sting or 2 on my arms, but I'm always trying to protect my face. In this situation, you suit up. If I'm looking for honey because I'm a mead maker, if I'm looking for honey because I'm in a farmer's market, this might be an answer to give you a whole lot of honey, but it isn't the best way to be able to work your bees.